Browns beat the Steelers 13-10 on a Dustin Hopkins game-winning field goal. He's Daryl Ryder. I'm Andy Baskin. We are brought to you locally by Smiley One and Bryant, Northeast Ohio's premier heating and cooling systems. All right, so we walked through a little bit of the game early on. I think it's interesting the way that Kevin Stefanski called the game. He was not going to make or let Dorian Thompson-Robinson make a mistake as far as throwing an interception. He did open up the offense, though, and open it up down the middle late in the game on that final 2-minute drive. And, when DTR had to be ready, he was, and he executed on that final drive. That was very impressive. And it makes you wonder how much more the playbook will open up for him on his next start.
Well, he showed confidence in DTR, no question about that. 29 runs to 43 passes called. I was expecting it to be the other way. I was expecting the 43.
They were all, the majority of those were high percentage plays.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no.
Yeah. It got to a point in the game I was wondering if they were going to actually be able to execute a screen pass on Sunday. They went with real high percentage throws. He threw it down the field a couple of times, and the couple of times he did throw it, you're like, ooh, I don't know if you want to be doing that, right? I mean, right. There were a couple of close calls on those throws. But, it was interesting talking to a couple guys in the locker room just about what a confidence booster this game is, right? Because let's be honest about it, DTR before that 4 for 4 for 39, he was 20 of 39 for $126. The numbers weren't that great, but again, made the plays where it mattered most. And so I was asking guys, hey, what kind of a confidence booster can it be for that kid? And there's video going around. I know the Browns put it up. DTR kind of broke down a little bit, after winning that game. You could see him wiping tears away from his eyes because, he was so overcome with emotion. Not only is it psychologically beneficial for him, but I think this football team believing, okay, this kid can help us. You know what I'm saying? Because you lose your franchise quarterback. That usually is a pretty big body blow. And just ask the New York Jets and other teams that this is
Cincinnati going into next week.
Right. And it usually kind of sucks the wind out of your sails. And the fact that he was able to lead a game-winning drive against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who give this team fits, I think is a shot in the arm, not only for DTR, showing him that he can do this at this level, but I think it's a shot in the arm for everybody else on the team that says, hey, kid's going to be okay. Wasn't great, but improved from the debut. And, as Myles Garrett said after the game, once things open up for him, once he gets used to the speed of the game and the plays and all that, because, a little bit of running joke, they had to tell him to quiet down in the huddle. Remember the scene from The Replacement?
Yeah.
Hey, Shane, they're going to hear you. Well, they had to tell him to kind of calm down a little bit. So Steelers can't hear the play calls because he was projecting so much in the huddle.
Right.
And he was, that excited. But I kind of feel like this is a pretty important psychological boost for this football team, because it's not to say that they don't believe in DTR. That's not what I'm getting at. It's just the fact that this kid, after the debut he had, the numbers he was putting up, right? He's completing 50% of his passes. He's barely over 125 yards. And then, bang, game on the line. He is perfect. 4 for 4, 39, blink of an eye. They go from the 35. They're in field goal range, ready to put this thing away. I think that just tells them we're going to be fine.
It was interesting earlier this week, too, especially when we found out Deshaun Watson was out for the rest of the season. There were a lot of people that thought, this could be it. This was the end of the season, that they really had no quarterback. They felt like they had nowhere to go. And in the back of my mind, I kept saying, well, they played half the season without Deshaun Watson. Yeah. And they played them the entire season without Nick Chubb.
It felt as bad. I'll be honest with you. It felt as bad as after the first Steelers game when they lost Nick Chubb, because Nick was such an integral part of what they did. And let's not underestimate him being in this building for this football game. And not only getting Miles joked, why'd they have to introduce him after me? And then he said, obviously he deserves that and whatnot. But, and then in the fourth quarter, about 7 minutes to play, they flashed Nick up, who was sitting in a suite. They put him on the scoreboard, and this place exploded. And that's, kudos to the Browns fans that were in, because this building was rocking, and they made the Steelers blow a couple of timeouts in both halves and made it real difficult on Pittsburgh to communicate and things like that. Just one of the few times in the post-1999 expansion era here where you really felt like the Cleveland Browns had a home field advantage in their own building, and they had that for this game.
It was interesting at the end of the game, again, being on the field, watching the disappointment on Steelers fans that were in the house. It's been so long when
there's a photo on that is circulating of a Steeler fan with the terrible crying towel draped over his head, and his hands are in his face. It is, because the Browns had already patented, the Browns fans had already patented the paper bag over the face.
I think the Saints really started that first, but that's okay.
Why do we have to go there?
Because that's your team. Baby.
I know.
That's the Aints. Kenny Pickett, though, has got it. I mean, Steeler fans are probably going crazy right now. 15-28 for 106. And the other part of that, too, is that the Browns have now beat every team in the AFC North this year.
Well, yeah, they have. And they are 3-2 right now. They'll finish the season against the Cincinnati Bengals, obviously being the situation that the Bengals find themselves in as we speak right now. Feel pretty good about that game, right? But there's a lot of football that has to be played before we can even get to think about that. But they are firmly now in second place. They are 7-3. They are now in a driver's seat to make the playoffs as they go west for 2 games. They, of course, next week they're in Denver. Then they will, from Denver, fly to Los Angeles and spend the week in LA. They'll work out at UCLA and practice there for that week before they play the Rams, and then, come back home. So big West Coast swing coming up, but they've won 3 in a row right now, and they are starting to get hot at the right time.
What do you think of the Browns' offensive line today?
I thought that they did a fairly good job. I mean, thank goodness that DeJuan Jones was back. They needed him back. And then you look at the run production. Jerome Ford barely getting over the goal line. Talk to him in the locker room. He said, I was pretty sure that I was in. I was pretty confident. But when you watch that replay, that ball barely crossed.
Yeah, but you know what?
I mean,
if you look at that and compare that to the safety that probably should have been called to start the game, I mean, there's a little bit of karma there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Now, I went ahead and I tried to do a frame by frame on that safety.
Okay.
Because here's
this Subverter stuff you promised.
Well, in full speed, it looked to me like it should be a safety. And Myles Garrett said after the game, the first 2 plays of the game probably should have been safeties. And he's got a legitimate argument. But watching a frame by frame, the rule is it's where the ball is when the contact occurs, not where the player ends up or is driven back to. And so Myles Garrett hit Pickett right at the goal line. And you can't.
But it's all about the plane, right? It's the same as when you're going in, it's the same as going out.
All it is if any part of that football is across that plane as he's being hit, that's a safety. And that's the biggest question, because from up high, it looks like it's a safety. But then when you freeze that where Garrett hits him initially, like there is a plausible chance that ball is 1 inch outside of that goal line. But the angle is such that you can't tell. I thought it was a safety. I thought the Browns got jobbed on that call. It should have been 2-0 right out of the gate. And shouldn't have even they should have won this game 12-10. We shouldn't have needed Dustin Hopkins there at the end. But, Myles Garrett showing up big in a big spot. The defensive line all day showing up in big spots. Myles Garrett outplayed TJ Watt today. I'm trying to remember in my head if I heard TJ Watt's name called today, and I don't. He did not sack Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
No, I don't remember it either.
Myles Garrett got 2 sacks. He's up to now 13 for the season. And I believe he's, as we record this podcast, I believe he leads the NFL right now. And the question now becomes, forget Defensive Player of the Year. If the Browns keep winning, could he jump into the MVP conversation?
He talked about that earlier this week, too. Let's talk about that when we come back. Also, more quarterback talk and DTR, what's next, and quarterback the Browns could be bringing in tomorrow on Monday. It's always game day in Cleveland, the post-game edition.